Hey there, welcome to Open Floor. This is the podcast where your voice has a platform to be heard. Make sure to check out our website at openfloor.me/home and to also follow us on Instagram at openfloorpodcast. Now enjoy the episode. Hey there, welcome to the second episode of Open Floor. I'm your host, Ali, and I just want to remind you before we begin to follow us on wherever you get your podcasts, for example, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. The full list of where you can subscribe to us is on our website at openfloor.me/home. On this episode, we're going to be discussing COVID-19 and its effect on school closures. I bring with me today Bryce Zhang, Anthony Zhao, and Matthew Wang, who are rising juniors, two of them at LHS and one of them at Milton Academy, all of them in Massachusetts. I asked for their opinions and their ideas regarding what remote learning was like because of school closures, if the schools closed early enough, and just in general their emotions on what's going on right now and their thoughts on what might happen in the future. This episode is more of a discussion type episode where there's three people and a host, and we're just talking about the questions that I pose. And hopefully this is a much more interactive format than the format of episode 1, where it was more of just an interview. I hope that you as a listener can gain some information on what emotions people might have during these times and make you more aware of how people may be feeling. Without further ado, let's jump right into it. Now I'm here with Bryce Zhang, Anthony Zhao, and Matthew Wang, all of them rising juniors in the state of Massachusetts. Thanks for coming on to the podcast. How well do you think schools handled closing due to COVID-19? And do you think they acted fast enough, or could they have been quicker on closing schools?
In my opinion, I feel like the schools closed too late because there were already lots of signs. You could have seen examples in other countries like South Korea and Italy and how they were affected by the virus. Yet, lots of states in the United States, including our own, chose not to close for a very long time, and I feel like as a result, lots of people ended up suffering when they didn't have to. So I feel like if we closed earlier, we could have fixed this problem a lot faster and without as much trouble.
Mm-hmm. Well, so do you think they delayed? Do you think they delayed closing because they wanted to prepare for online school, or they actually just didn't want to close because they wanted us to stay?
Well, we didn't have online school until 2 weeks after we closed.
Oh, sure.
Yeah,
you're right.
Many schools like our own didn't even have preparations ready in time, so I feel like it wouldn't have mattered because if we had closed earlier, we would have been able to open earlier potentially if the entire state was able to lock down successfully, which it wasn't. And as a result, school is still closed.
Well, Milton was in a weird situation because our our spring vacation was 2 days away, but then the parents all got really pissed and they wanted the school to close, but the school wanted to wait until vacation, so it was really awkward, and then they closed 1 day early, last minute, and I don't think that was a good idea.
I feel like some of the school administrations have were more focused on trying to care about their own schedules more than the safety of the people at the school. Because there was a bunch of rumors going around in LHS that people had COVID-19, and also there were confirmed cases in our school district, and I have no idea why we didn't just close when they were confirmed.
Mm-hmm. So now, do you think that by closing the schools, they increased stress on students or decreased stress on students, especially with remote learning and it being a completely different format of learning? Do you think it, even though we were all home, do you think it increased the stress from school closing or decreased the stress?
I feel like the way that they handled the situation, it reduced the stress because by making a pass-fail system and by significantly reducing the workload, stress was reduced for Lexington students. But I feel like there's a drawback in that by making it a pass-fail system, it really reduced the variance among students. As a result, many students didn't put in as much effort as they probably should have, and there was not as much significant like students might not have learned as much because they weren't putting in as much effort and there wasn't as much work to do as a result.
Yeah, I agree, but like I know some people who because of the pass fail situation, they're actually like a little bit more stressed because the grades in quarter 3 were like looking to be a lot better than the grades in quarter 1, quarter 2, or the years prior. But and since they made it pass or fail, then that just like kind of screwed over their progression. Because I know that they know that their GPA would have improved from quarter 3 and quarter 4, but because it's now pass or fail, then they're kind of like screwed over.
Well, I
Yeah,
think
but
for our classes, like even though we have pass fail too, there's still teacher comments at the end of the semester. So like teachers will like be able to give feedback there, and those comments count almost as much as your actual grades. So we're still sort of incentivized, but I did notice that some kids put in less effort.
yeah,
So
I feel like
less
this whole
effort
system
for.
was like inevitable. You really couldn't solve this issue without having a predisposed plan, which almost every school district in Massachusetts did not have.
Mm.
So, because they were able to make this, so many schools were able to shift this quickly. I feel like that was still pretty impressive. But yeah, I feel like if this situation continues, they could definitely improve on it in the following school year.
Do you think pass fail was a good decision?
The problem with pass or fail is that it really it 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 made your first two for students that did well in the first two quarters, like Matthew said, it was really beneficial. But for students who didn't, they were essentially like they were given no option to improve improve their grade. So
Yeah.
I feel
Wait, so
like
then then what would be the downside to like just continuing grades as normal?
Well, the thing is, we had
because it was
no
online.
tests.
Yeah,
and
because it was
quizzes.
online, it was very, very difficult to make it fair.
Like,
And
what do you
also,
mean?
like,
Like, if you're grading on a regular scale relies a lot on tests and like actually doing work in class, but from an online environment, it's really hard to manage cheating and just make students work ethically because you don't know how students can work from home. Like they can collaborate, they can essentially boost their own grades without putting in the work that they should.
But the thing is,
So-
again, it's pass fail, right? So it's pretty hard to.
That is also true.
Wait, I don't understand.
So right, like if because it's pass fail, you don't have
Like-
that incentive to cheat because now the bar is set really low just to get.
Yeah, the
same
way you can
grade
think
as
of pass
someone
fail is
else,
it's
just
below
as-
50%.
Oh,
but
I
it's
see
above
now.
50%.
I see.
So getting a D in a pass fail system is still a pass.
So then, what if they raise the pass threshold to like 70%?
well, it's
I feel
still
like that
really
could work.
easy
The only
to
problem is
pass.
that it would still be like pretty much the same.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And also,
Okay.
we didn't have any tests or quizzes, so like if you just miss one assignment, which is really easy to do, your grade might just like plummet, because that's essentially like 1/5 or like 1/8 of your grade gone.
And also because many
yeah.
teachers didn't set up their assignments in a way where there was like a calendar or a schedule so that you could see when the next assignments would be. You could miss them, like Matt said, where either they forgot to post it on time, so you just didn't see it until like the day before it was due, or you just did not see the assignment at all because Google Classroom sometimes doesn't give you a notification.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Now I want to move on to the topic that I don't know if you guys have all taken the AP test, but about the College Board, and especially how they handled AP testing this year. And so,
Oh, God.
and so, do you think that during this time that they were administering the AP test, do you think they lost a lot of legitimacy in what they do, and do you think that students will keep on taking the SATs and the AP tests from the College Board in the future, or do you think this is like the straw that breaks the camel's back?
Okay, but the thing is, like, College Board has such a big monopoly on education. Like, every student needs to take these tests. Like, there's not anything.
Well, like, not
else that they can
necessarily.
do.
Yeah, you don't have to. But I feel like the problem with
It's
the AP
still
test
like really
Yeah,
kind of
but like
important to
I know
do.
what you're saying, but I feel like the problem with the AP test this year was that they still went through with it, but I feel like they really just shouldn't have because the way they were done this year, uh, it made lots of students who took certain classes, it rendered lots of the things they learned useless because either they moved too far into the curriculum, or for students that were didn't learn everything in order, it meant
Oh
that
yeah.
they were essentially screwed because the order that they learned it meant that almost like a lot of the stuff they did learn was useless for the test. So as a result, either some students like they were fine, but a lot of students who didn't learn in order or went too far, it rendered most of the year useless for them. And
Well,
I
then you
feel
have to
like
remember that not like the point of an AP class is not like, oh, prepare for the test for the whole year. It's still like the
yeah,
class that
yeah,
you take at school.
yeah, but like the fact that we put so much emphasis on the test made it like that. Where if the test itself, if we just chose not to like take the test this year, I feel like it would have been fine. But the fact that we were not prepared for it, and we went out of like a lot of students went out of order during through the curriculum, meant that it was just very hard for some students. I would have to say.
I don't know how like correct I am on assuming this, but I'm guessing that this year there's gonna be a lot more students with fours or fives or just higher scores in general, and then I feel like that because there's so many more students with higher scores, then these tests from specifically 2020 aren't gonna matter as much because everyone did so well.
So, do you think like colleges like Harvard and Yale, these are just two of them, they've gone test optional for 2020 to 2021, and then the UC schools have gone test optional uh, for until 2024. So, do you think there's any merit at all in taking the AP test now, even though that a bunch of schools are just going to go test optional and most likely won't take a look at the grades that come out of the college board, right? So,
Well,
do
I
you
feel
I
think
mean,
like this
that's
is
that's
an
also
something?
that's
argument.
already becoming widespread in terms of the APs.
Yeah, I feel like this is an argument against standardized testing as a whole, as opposed to the current COVID situation. Because I'm not gonna get too far into this, but lots of people have already made valid claims against why standardized testing, uh, as a system is detrimental for many students because while they may learn stuff, standardized testing performances aren't always reflective and usually aren't reflective of a student's actual performance. Either they do much better on standardized tests or they do much worse than their actual capabilities. Um, so by putting so much emphasis on standardized testing, you really punish certain learning styles, while rewarding other learning styles, which is not fair for many students.
Mhm. Right.
So I feel like the
Um,
move away from standardized testing for colleges is a good one because, yeah, the
and
reasons I
so
said.
yeah, and so building on that, right? So we have the rising seniors who are going to be applying to colleges uh, in this coming year. And so, do you think that they have it easier now that some of the top 20 schools have gone test optional, or do you think it's still going to be as competitive as before?
I mean, there's no way it can become less competitive unless less
Yeah,
people are
because
applying.
everyone in the country has the same, like if they're all affected the same way. Some people may get an advantage because of their actual like their merits and stuff, but as a whole, it's not going to be like more advantageous or something. It's not going to be like, oh, it's way easier this year than it was last year, or it's way harder because everyone's
Yeah,
affected the same.
yeah.
So, do you think they're going to weight other stuff higher than, per se, if someone submitted an application and they didn't take the SAT, they didn't submit an SAT score? Do you think that, let's say, their GPA would be weighted higher, or maybe extracurriculars would be weighted higher, or
Well, I
Probably
feel like it
inherently higher.
like yeah, inherently higher, but as a whole, it would be the same. Because if you just take out one factor, then all the other factors would inherently be higher, but not like so much higher. Because you can't make them significantly higher, or else it wouldn't make sense.
yep?
But they would have to be slightly higher because you're removing an entire factor.
Yeah.
And so, do you think that this situation we're in now with colleges again going test optional and then maybe overlooking some of the stuff from the college board, do you think this is also going to carry on into the year when we submit college applications? So that would be in the next, so not next year, the year after, right? We're starting to plan. So do you think that our planning is going to be different than if COVID-19 hadn't come into play? Do you think that COVID-19 plays a role, let's say, in deciding what colleges we might choose now?
Yeah, I feel like this is just a trend in the de-emphasis on standardized testing. I feel like even if COVID-19 didn't happen, schools would eventually start laying off on the emphasis on standardized testing, if not completely, like some schools are right now. So I feel like next year, many schools will remain with their stance on the requirements for taking these standardized tests.
Mm-hmm. Now moving on to the topic of next year, right? So there are talks on either going completely back to school or like a hybrid option where maybe like the science classes go back because they have like in-person labs, or just make it completely online. And so what do you think is going to be the most viable option for next year, and what plans do you think that they'll have to put in place to make sure everyone is safe? Everyone is kept
The
safe.
thing is, I think the final goal is definitely to be in person again. But I think schools and administration definitely need to take precautions going into the fall. Like, we can't all just suddenly, without, like, how many months has it been? Like 4 months, 3 months of like no human interaction. All of a sudden, like, as the kids are going to the same building. I don't think we can do that. I think we just have to like slowly move back into our like normal lives, and we have to take a lot of precautions.
What I've heard from. All right, you finish.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think like.
So what I've heard.
I don't think.
Right.
I don't think at the fall. I don't think we're gonna be back in school. But I think by the end of next year, like even maybe midway, we might be completely back in school. Depending on the
What I heard from my friend in Hong Kong is that like they went back to school like for the last month before summer vacation, and then what they did was they split up the school into like 2 halves, and then each half would have half a day of normal school with like really small classes, and then the other half of the other half of the school would have online classes, so that there would be half as many people in the school building at all times.
And so do you think
Maybe
this is
that's
a viable option? Do you think it's like a okay option to consider? Or
I think anything is better than going back to school online fully.
Yeah, because
but
lots of classes
yeah.
just don't work, such as music classes. Because,
Yeah.
like, this is just an example that affects me, because I'm in an ensemble where if you take online class, this class just does not work very well. And other classes, like you said, science, where the in-lab, like doing labs in class is very important for the learning experience. Where if you were to do it online, you just would not be able to get the same effect from the material. So I feel like while it is important to go back to school, we have to like choose, or we have to figure out which classes it's necessary for, because, for example, classes like English and math, where it's more content-based and you can learn it online, I feel like it's important for those classes. Like, you don't have to go back to school. It's not mandatory to go back to school for those classes, whereas for like science and like music and like
I see.
physical education to an extent.
do you think physical education is going to be the same as it was before COVID-19, right? Because at least I can say I was in the fencing class for phys ed, and so immediately when COVID-19 began to become a thing, so to say, about end of February, beginning of March, right? They told us that you can't do fencing anymore because you have to wear suits that are shared between every kid in the school. And so do you think that we're even going to have like a communal phys ed at this point, or is it going to be like a class with like 5 people at a time?
Yeah, they would definitely have to change the structure because by the nature of many physical education classes, you have to come in contact with other people because that's just how different like sports and parts of phys ed work. So they would definitely have to change lots of classes to accommodate for this.
Okay, but the thing I'm worrying about is, like, you said that they said you couldn't do fencing because you had to, share suits or whatever. So if they started worrying about people potentially having COVID-19 that early, why didn't we close that early, right? Because there obviously is a possibility that one of the students in LHS has it. That's why they're saying you can't use the suits anymore. Why didn't they just close the schools then?
Yep.
Oh.
It's viable. Yeah.
When did they say you can wear the suits?
Again, I think it was either end of February or beginning of March, right? And then 2 weeks after that, they just closed the school. So it was at that point that I think the school was also getting on edge, thinking about whether they should close or not. And again, at LHS, right, the lunchroom, Commons 2, because I sit there normally, but it's crowded, and so most definitely there's not 6 feet of space between each person.
Well, yeah,
so
I feel like that decision makes no sense because why would you restrict one PE class but not the entire school?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Right, so they restrict
Because it's probably easier to make the decision for one class rather than the whole school.
Yeah, but if you make
Just
a
'cause
decision
of that.
for one class, it's not gonna. In the long run, it's not.
I know I'm not saying that it's not stupid because it is, but that's probably
Well, the thing is because
what
when
happened.
when they told us you can't wear the suits anymore, they just combined us with the other class at the same time of us. So it then became a huge 40-person class. So again, it's just the absurdity of, I guess maybe late timing, but then again, they at least caught it earlier than, right, because at March 13th, about 2 weeks later, we began to actually hit the stride and actually go up and to hit the peak. So they did close it in time, so to say, but I think, again, it might have been a bit too late with regards to. Okay, now, if there's one thing you want the listener to know from your experience during quarantine, during like during the remote learning that we've had, what's one thing you want them to know? For let's say in 10 years, someone is going to be listening to this. What do you want them to know from your experience during this time?
Well, I'm extremely introverted, so there is absolutely nothing I miss from my old life now. The thing is, we have like 1 hour per class every week of assignments. So there's so much more time to do anything else, right? Like you can do extracurriculars, extra like outside of school stuff. Find out like what you want to do in college, what you want to do later in life. You have so much time, and like obviously I haven't really taken full advantage of that, and like that's on me. But I've had that opportunity, so I think in a way having COVID-19, obviously it's not a good thing, right? But there are obviously some good outcomes of it.
Yeah. What about
Well,
you?
the problem is that it wasn't very viable to take advantage of everything because everything is closed or was closed.
Right,
So,
but there are so many like online resources that are available.
yeah.
Because I know that my mom's company, which is like a pharmaceutical company, they had nanotech courses and like Python courses that anyone could take for free. Then and obviously there's so many other websites or companies offering these free like online courses that you could just personally enrich yourself on.
Yeah.
The thing is, again, it depends on who you are and if you have the capability to learn from an online course, right? Again, this whole thing comes down to whether people enjoyed remote learning and they actually learned something from remote learning, or was it just doing it just, again, to get the pass-fail. So that's also, I think, something to take into consideration. Right. So thank you guys for coming onto the podcast. I hope that this discussion was informative for you guys, but also informative for the listener. And again, thank you. So that was my interview with Bryce, Anthony, and Matthew. They bring up a lot of good points, but also bring up a lot of valid emotions and ideas that are most definitely stemming during these times in the student population, but also in just people in general. Most definitely schools are one of the hardest hit places during these times because they have control over so many students, and some students maybe don't have a right home to go to. Maybe some students don't have money to get food, and so they get it from the school. And so there are a lot of resources that are coming out during these times to be able to support them. And so if you would like to support schools and to be able to support the resources that they're trying to provide to people, then I urge you to donate or get in touch with people that work at the school district and see how you can help. So that concludes this second episode of Open Floor. I'm sorry that this episode was a tiny bit shorter than the last episode, but I think that we got a lot of stuff talked about during the discussions, and I hope that next week it'll be a little bit longer of an episode, but also we'll try to make it more enjoyable and more of a discussion type of format. But until next time, thanks for listening to Open Floor. Thank you for listening to this episode of Open Floor. I want to thank our wonderful producer Amin Purgol Muhammad for producing this episode. Go to our website at openfloor.me/home to sign up for email updates for new episodes, and visit us on Instagram at Open Floor Podcast. I'm Ali Musallai, and I'll see you in the next episode.